At Starbound, we tell stories the human way, not with artificial voices or AI slop. In the end, what's HFY without humanity? Subscribe to keep it this way. My name's Chikondi. Let's begin.
The name is Zarek, and once, long ago, I was considered by many to be one of the fiercest warriors in the galaxy. My 4 arms, each wielding a different gun, and my bone-tipped tail for close-quarters combat, were seen as far more than a gimmick. I was told more times than I can remember that I was the epitome of a warrior, and the worst part was that I believed it. How mistaken I was. So mistaken that it set me on a path where I felt terror for the first time, fighting alongside humanity. But I'm getting ahead of myself here, aren't I? Let me start from the beginning. Back when I still thought my 4 yellow arms meant something in the grand scheme of the universe. Back when I believed that muscles alone could win wars. My story with humanity began in what I now recognize as the most obvious setup in galactic history. Admiral Trozier of the Galactic Council had summoned the top warriors of our time to his vast command vessel. The room was filled with legends, or at least beings who thought themselves legends. Scaled behemoths from Crothon 1, cyber-enhanced soldiers from the Nexus worlds, and there I was, flexing all 4 arms like some sort of show-off at a marketplace. The Admiral's request was simple. The Council needed a representative to fight alongside a non-member species called humanity in their conflict against the Vitrit people. The Vitrit were pushing across established borders, trying to conquer some strategic planet in human space. It was a matter of galactic politics, really. Show support for a potential future council member. Maintain the balance of power. All that bureaucratic nonsense. I remember standing there in my prime, my 4 yellow arms rippling with more muscle than most species would ever hope to possess in their entire bodies. My bone-tipped tail swayed behind me, sharp enough to pierce armor plating. I was magnificent. I was powerful. I was also, as it turned out, an idiot. When the Admiral first made his request, I didn't immediately volunteer. These humans were primitives, barely worth my attention. They were fighting some border dispute that mattered little to me. Why should the greatest warrior in the galaxy waste his time on such a minor conflict? Let someone lesser go. Let someone who needed to prove themselves take this thankless assignment. That's when the trap closed around me, though I was too blind to see it.
Zarek would be perfect,
one of the other warriors said, a younger Cronian whose name I've since forgotten.
But this mission might be beneath someone of his stature.
Indeed,
another chimed in, a cyber soldier whose optics gleamed with what I now recognize as badly suppressed amusement.
We couldn't possibly ask our greatest warrior to babysit some primitives. Better that one of us lesser fighters volunteer.
The humans probably wouldn't appreciate true skill anyway,
a third added, and I could hear the others murmuring agreement. My chest swelled. My ego, already the size of a small moon, inflated to planetary proportions. Nonsense, I declared, stepping forward with all the pompous certainty of someone who had never truly been tested. If the Council needs its best, then I shall go. These humans will see what a real warrior looks like. My mere presence on the battlefield means certain victory. The room erupted in cheers and congratulations. They clapped me on my shoulders, all 4 of them, and praised my courage and selflessness. I basked in it like a fool basking in the warmth of a star, never realizing I was flying too close and about to get burned. Looking back now, decades later, I can see it so clearly. Those young warriors had played me like a musical instrument. They were too afraid to go themselves, too smart to waste their time on what they correctly identified as a meaningless political gesture. So they inflated my already ridiculous ego, used my own pride against me, and sent me off to what they probably hoped would be a humbling experience. It worked. By the stars, it worked better than they could have ever imagined. I fell for it completely, thinking that my mere presence on any battlefield meant certain victory. I was so stupid, so impossibly blind to reality. I couldn't see past my own reflection in my polished armor. I was the greatest warrior in the galaxy, after all. What could possibly go wrong? This is how I ended up in a small human drop capsule, a primitive vehicle designed to deploy troops directly onto a battlefield. The thing was cramped, dark, and smelled of human sweat. 6 humans shared the space with me, all of them strapped into their seats. When one of them, a tall male with short dark hair, approached to help me with my safety harness, I waved him away with 2 of my 4 arms. "I need no assistance," I said, my voice dripping with condescension. "I am Zarik, representative of the Galactic Council. I have fought in conflicts you cannot imagine. I can certainly manage a simple restraint system made by primitives." The human stepped back, his face carefully neutral, though I caught the tightness around his eyes. The others exchanged glances but said nothing. The atmosphere in the capsule went from professional to ice cold in an instant. I grabbed the safety harness and began fastening it. How hard could it be? Click this here, thread that through there. The humans made it look simple enough. Of course, what my arrogant younger self didn't consider was that the human safety equipment was designed for human bodies, not for 4-armed aliens with tails. But I was too proud to ask for help, too certain of my own superiority. I got the straps on. They felt secure enough. I settled back in my seat, confident that I had proven my competence in this small matter. The humans completed their pre-drop checks, the capsule sealed with the noise of pressurizing atmosphere. 30 seconds to drop, came a voice over the comm system. I gripped the armrests with 2 of my hands, keeping my other 2 free to hold my weapons. I was ready. I was prepared. I was about to learn a very painful lesson. 10 seconds. The capsule shuddered. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Drop! The bottom fell out of the universe. I had been in combat drops before, in Council-approved deployment pods that used inertial dampeners and stabilization fields. This was not that. This was a metal coffin thrown at a planet like a rock from a sling, with nothing but friction panels and atmospheric braking to slow our descent. The capsule shook violently, my teeth rattled, and then with a sound like tearing fabric, my safety harness came undone. I had threaded it wrong. In my pride and my refusal to accept help, I had somehow managed to secure the straps in a configuration that looked right but was, in fact, completely backwards. The force of the drop pulled everything loose in one catastrophic moment. Suddenly, I was airborne in a plummeting metal box. My tail flailed wildly, smacking against the walls with painful cracks. My 4 arms windmilled uselessly as I tumbled through the air. I slammed into the ceiling. No, the wall. No, the other wall. My head cracked against something metal and unyielding. Stars exploded across my vision, the painful kind, not the pretty ones you see in space. I caught a glimpse of the humans, all properly strapped in, watching me bounce around like a child's toy. One of them was shouting something, but I couldn't hear over the roar of atmospheric entry and my own panicked bellowing. My shoulder hit a storage compartment. My hip crashed into a support beam. My tail wrapped around someone's seat, and I spun like a top before breaking free and slamming face first into the opposite bulkhead. This was my first little appetizer of the horror that would be fighting alongside humans. Not from enemy fire, not from clever tactics, but from my own stubborn pride. I was being beaten senseless by a simple drop capsule because I had refused to accept help. And then came my first little appetizer of compassion. Through my spinning, disoriented vision, I saw one of the humans unlock her safety harness.
She was small, shorter than the others, with dark hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Her fingers moved with quick certainty as she freed herself and pushed off her seat, timing her movement perfectly to intercept my tumbling form. She was stronger than she looked. Or perhaps I was just so disoriented that I offered no resistance. Either way, she managed to grab two of my arms and use the momentum to swing us both toward an empty jump seat. With skill and patience, she shoved me into it and began securing the safety harness properly.
"Hold still!"
she shouted over the noise. I held still. What else could I do? I was thoroughly humbled, aching in at least 7 different places, and completely at the mercy of this small human who had just risked her own safety to help me. She got the straps secured just as the capsule hit a particularly violent patch of turbulence. The harness held. I stayed in my seat. The human, I would later learn her name was Ava, the squad spotter, made her way back to her own position with the kind of zero-gravity maneuvering that hinted at extensive training and experience. The other humans, all male, watched this entire exchange with expressions I couldn't quite read. It wasn't approval, that much was certain. They seemed to think Ava's intervention was unnecessary, perhaps even unwise. My earlier disrespectful attitude had clearly made an impression, and not a positive one. The squad treated me with a cold distance that was probably well-deserved. The rest of the descent passed in a blur of noise, shaking, and the throbbing pain of multiple impacts. When we finally hit the ground, the deceleration slammed me forward against my properly secured harness, and I had never been more grateful for anything in my life. The capsule's door blew open in a bang that made my already ringing ears protest. Immediately, the humans moved into action, showing the kind of synchronization that spoke of countless hours of training. 3 of them with lighter weapons went first, weapons up and scanning for threats. Then came 2 more, these carrying longer rifles with complex scopes. The snipers, I realized. They filed out in perfect order, each one covering different angles. In 30 seconds, the capsule was empty except for me and Ava. I fumbled with my harness, my hands shaking a little from adrenaline and the after effects of my impromptu beating. Ava waited patiently, though I could see she was eager to join her squad outside. Finally, I got free and began gathering my weapons. 4 pistols, 1 for each hand, just as I had done countless times before. I felt Ava watching me.
"You're some kind of big deal, right?"
she said. Her voice was calm, matter-of-fact.
"Great warrior who can use 4 weapons at once and whatever?"
I straightened, trying to recover some shred of dignity. "I am Zarek, champion of—"
"Yeah, sure."
She cut me off.
"Listen, you're going to die in the first hour if you don't change your attitude."
I stared at her, all 4 of my eyes blinking in surprise. She stepped closer, her expression serious.
"I don't care what you were back home. Out here, you're part of a squad. Our squad. And the way you've been acting, looking down on us, refusing to help, being disrespectful, that's going to get you killed. Maybe it'll get one of us killed trying to save you, which is even worse."
"I don't need," I began, but she held up a hand.
"You do need. You need to apologize to the squad. You need to make sure your relationship with them is at least professional, if not friendly. Because when the shooting starts, and it will start, you need to trust them, and they need to trust you. That's how we survive."
She moved toward the door, then paused and looked back at me.
"I helped you because it was the right thing to do. But I won't do it again if you keep acting like we're beneath you. None of us will."
Then she was gone, disappearing through the door to join her squad. I stood there in the empty capsule, my head still aching from where I had hit it during the drop. Perhaps it was the impact, some mild concussion that made me more receptive to sense. Or perhaps it was the first crack in my armor of pride, formed by the undeniable reality of my recent humiliation. I didn't immediately accept her words. My ego was too large, too well fortified by years of praise and easy victories. But I didn't discard them either. Some small part of me,
Perhaps the part that had just spent several minutes being ragdolled around a metal box tucked those words away in the back of my mind. Today, at my older age, I can say with absolute certainty that those words saved my life. But the young fool I was at the time only did the bare minimum to survive. I remembered the advice. I didn't follow it yet, but I remembered it. I gathered my weapons and stepped out of the capsule. The planet was strange, alien, even to someone like me who had seen dozens of worlds. The sky was a pale purple, streaked with clouds that looked almost green in certain light. The ground was covered in vegetation with white leaves that seemed to reflect all light. A light rain was falling, warm and slightly acidic on my skin. The humans hadn't abandoned me, despite their cold attitude. They were formed up in a defensive perimeter around the capsule, weapons trained outward. Their squad leader, I would later learn his name was Liam, gestured for me to approach. I did, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity despite my being slightly unsteady on my feet. Liam was average height for a human, with short brown hair starting to gray at the temples, and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He looked me over quickly, his expression unreadable. "You good to move?" he asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "All right, here's the situation. Our target is a mobile communications station the Vitrit set up in the mountains about 15 clicks northwest." He pulled up a holographic display from his wrist unit, showing the terrain. "Other squads have dropped in the region. We're going to use the chaos they create as cover. Avoid direct conflict as much as possible until we get close enough to the station." He zoomed in on the target area. "Once we're in position, we plant charges, extract to minimum safe distance, and blow it. This will take out Vitrit FTL communications for this entire continent. Any questions?" I should have asked many questions. I should have inquired about tactical directives, about how they handled combat situations, about what my role would be. Instead, my wounded pride spoke for me. "No questions," I said, adding with a sneer I now deeply regret. "Though I don't understand why we don't simply march straight toward the enemy like real warriors instead of skulking about." The reaction was immediate. Several of the humans laughed, though not in a friendly way. One of them, a stocky man with a scarred face, grinned and said,
"Hey, Liam, we know who to send in fast if we stumble across the enemy."
The others chuckled. Liam just shook his head slightly and said, "Move out." The next half hour exists in my memory as disconnected fragments, pieces of a puzzle that don't quite fit together. I remember the white leaves of the alien vegetation, how they seemed to absorb sound, making the world feel muffled and strange. I remember the rain intensifying, warm droplets that stung slightly when they hit exposed skin. I remember huge rocks, weathered and ancient, that we used as cover as we moved through the terrain. But mostly, I remember my confidence. Despite the humiliation in the drop capsule, despite Ava's warning, I still felt eager to prove my value to these humans. I wanted to show them that the incident with the safety harness was just a fluke, a simple mistake that didn't diminish my status as the greatest warrior in the galaxy. I was about to learn just how wrong I was. We had covered maybe 10 clicks when Ava, who had been monitoring communications, held up a fist. The squad stopped immediately, weapons coming up, everyone scanning for threats.
"Contact,"
she said quietly.
"Multiple squads reporting hostiles defending the comm station. Heavy resistance."
Liam's expression didn't change, but I saw certainty in his eyes when he spoke.
"Looks like we'll have to eliminate some hostiles after all."
My 4 hearts beat faster. This was it. This was my chance to prove myself. "Point me to them," I said, trying to sound brave and eager. The humans laughed, but it was a different kind of laughter than before. Knowing, almost pitying.
"You'll see them when the explosions start,"
one of them said. I thought they were joking. I know now they were completely serious. We continued forward, and the terrain became more challenging. Rocky outcroppings provided cover, but also limited sightlines. The sound of distant fighting began to filter through the sound-absorbing vegetation. Explosions, weapons fire, the occasional scream. The two human snipers broke off from the group, positioning themselves on high ground with overlapping fields of fire. The rest of us, Liam, the three soldiers with the compact but heavy-looking weapons, Ava with her lighter gear and communication equipment, and me, moved forward in a loose formation. I positioned myself at the front, all 4 pistols drawn and ready. I was ready to show them, ready to prove myself, ready to demonstrate the power of the greatest warrior in the galaxy. We crested a rise, and suddenly the enemy was there. Vitrit soldiers, at least 20 of them, their blue-tinged skin marked with the distinctive facial tentacles of their species. They wore exoskeletons that enhanced their strength and speed, and they were setting up a defensive position around what looked like a relay station for the main communications hub. I didn't wait for orders. I didn't coordinate with the squad. I simply charged forward with a battle cry that would have terrified recruits back in the Galactic Army. 4 arms, 4 guns, all firing at once. I was a whirlwind of violence, a storm of bullets, an unstoppable force of missing every single shot. The Vitrit were at least 100 meters away. My pistols, designed for close to medium-range combat, couldn't hit anything at that distance. The bullets scattered wide, most of them not even coming close to the enemy. I must have looked impressive, 4 guns blazing away, my bone-tipped tail whipping behind me for balance. But impressive doesn't win battles. The humans, on the other hand, were scoring kills. Their weapons barked with sharp bursts. Vitrit soldiers dropped, their exoskeletons sparking and failing. The 2 snipers, positioned on the high ground, were picking off targets with methodical accuracy. Each shot 1 kill. I kept firing, all 4 pistols clicking empty within seconds of each other. I fumbled to reload, using my tail to hold spare magazines while my hands worked. By the time I was ready to shoot again, the humans had eliminated half the enemy force. That's when the explosions started. The Vitrit called in artillery support. The humans called in an airstrike. The world turned into fire and noise and flying dirt. I dove behind a boulder, all thoughts of glorious combat forgotten in the primal need to not be blown apart. Shells screamed overhead. Something exploded close enough that the shockwave lifted me off my feet and slammed me into my cover. My ears rang, my vision blurred. I gasped for air and tasted blood. This was when I made perhaps the wisest decision of my young life. I decided to stay behind cover. The battle escalated with terrifying speed. More human squads joined the flight, their drop capsules streaking from the sky like meteors. The Vitrit reinforced their position, clearly realizing that the communications station was the real target. What had started as a skirmish between 2 small forces rapidly became a full-scale battle. I stayed frozen behind my boulder, my 4 pistols held in trembling hands, and watched. I saw a Vitrit soldier's exoskeleton fail, his organic limbs tearing away from his body as he stumbled and fell. I saw a human step on a mine. The explosion reduced them to component parts in an instant. I watched aircraft from both sides dogfight in the purple sky, trailing smoke and flame before crashing into the forest. Drone swarms collided mid-air, a buzzing cloud of tiny explosions and falling debris. The air filled with smoke so thick I could barely see. The sound was constant, overwhelming, a wall of noise that made thinking impossible. This was war, real war, not the controlled exercises I had participated in, not the ceremonial conflicts between Galactic Council members where rules were followed and honor mattered. This was chaos and death and horror beyond anything I had imagined. I watched a human soldier, pinned down by enemy fire, stand up to drag a wounded comrade to safety. They were both cut down before they made it 5 steps. I watched Vitrit soldiers advance in formation, professional and precise, only to be obliterated by an artillery strike that left nothing but a crater. The visions would follow me for the rest of my life. Even now, decades later, I sometimes wake up in the night, my sleeping clothes soaked with sweat, remembering limbs scattered like dropped toys, remembering the smell of burning flesh and scorched earth, remembering the screams that somehow cut through all the other noise. My younger self's vision of himself as a proud warrior crumbled to dust in those minutes. What replaced it was raw, primal terror. How long did I crouch there, frozen? I don't know. It felt like hours, but was probably only 10 or 15 minutes. Time loses meaning when you're certain you're about to die. It was Ava's words that finally broke through my paralysis, her voice somehow cutting through the fog of fear in my mind.
You're going to die in the first hour if you don't change your attitude.
I grabbed my comm unit with a trembling hand and opened the squad channel. "Please," I gasped. "Please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was stupid and arrogant and wrong about everything. Please, please help me." Static. Just static. "I apologize for my behavior," I continued, my voice breaking. "I was disrespectful. I looked down on you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please respond. Please." More static. Had they died? Had they abandoned me? I deserved it if they had, but the thought of being left here alone in this hell made my 4 hearts seize with panic. "Please," I begged again. "I know I don't deserve help. I know I've been terrible, but please, please." The smoke around me was so thick I could barely see past my own arms. Explosions continued to rock the battlefield. Something massive, a dropship maybe, screamed overhead and crashed somewhere behind the Vitrit lines. I was crying. I realized I was crying, tears streaming down my face, my body shaking with sobs. The greatest warrior in the galaxy, reduced to a terrified child begging for help. And then, through the smoke, a figure appeared. Liam walked toward me like he was taking a casual stroll, not crossing an active battlefield. His armor was scorched and dented. Blood ran down one side of his face from a cut on the forehead. But his weapon was ready. His eyes were clear, and when he saw me, he actually smiled.
"Why are you crying, big fella?"
he asked. I couldn't respond. My voice was gone, stolen by fear and shame and overwhelming relief. I just stared at him, this human who had come back for me despite everything.
"Come on,"
he said, extending a hand.
"Let's get you out of here."
I took his hand with one of mine and he pulled me to my feet. He led me through the smoke, moving with confidence through terrain I could barely see. We passed bodies, both human and Vitrit. We passed burning equipment and crashed drones. We passed through hell itself, and Liam guided me through it all. When we finally reached the rest of the squad, positioned in a defensive crater about 200 meters from my boulder, I collapsed, just fell to my knees and cried, great racking sobs that shook my entire body. Ava was there, alive and whole, her equipment somehow still functioning despite the chaos. The 3 soldiers with their compact weapons were alive, though one had a bandaged arm. The 2 snipers had repositioned and were continuing to provide overwatch. They all saw me break down. They all saw the mighty Zarek, champion of the Galactic Council, reduced to a sobbing mess. And not one of them mocked me.
"First time in real combat?"
one of the soldiers asked, his voice gentle. I could only nod.
"It gets easier,"
he said, though his eyes suggested he was lying to be kind.
"You did good, surviving this long."
I hadn't done anything. I had frozen, panicked, and been rescued like a helpless civilian. But they were trying to make me feel better, and that kindness just made me cry harder. The battle continued around us for another 3 hours. The squad completed their mission, They planted the charges on a secondary communications relay while the main force kept the Vitrit busy. They did it without me because I was useless, a burden they had to protect rather than an asset they could utilize. When the charges blew, taking out a crucial part of the Vitrit communication network, I barely registered it. I was still in shock, still processing what I had witnessed, still trying to reconcile the warrior I thought I was with the terrified creature I had become. When the extraction shuttles arrived, the squad helped me aboard. They strapped me in properly this time, and I accepted their help without protest. Ava sat across from me.
You did the right thing,
She said.
calling for help, admitting you were wrong. That takes courage.
I wanted to laugh at that. Courage. I had shown nothing but cowardice. But Liam, sitting next to her, nodded in agreement.
Lots of people die because they're too proud to ask for help. You're alive. That's what matters.
During the flight back to the command ship, somewhere between the planet's atmosphere and the cold of space, I made a decision. I couldn't be this person anymore. I couldn't be the arrogant warrior who thought muscles and weapons made them invincible. That person had died on that battlefield, torn apart by the reality of what war actually meant. When we docked, when I gave my report to Admiral Trozier, I was honest. Brutally, completely honest. I told him I had been useless, that the humans had completed their mission despite me, not because of me. I told him I was a disgrace as the Council's representative. I expected anger. I expected punishment. Instead, the Admiral looked at me with something like understanding.
War is not what the stories make it seem,
He said.
You'll learn that today. The question is, what will you do with that knowledge?
I dropped everything when I returned home. My status as a warrior, my role in the Galactic Army, my belief that wars were glorious tests of skill and strength. I walked away from all of it. Some called me a coward. Some said I had disgraced myself and my people. But I didn't care. I had seen the truth of what I was, and I couldn't live that lie anymore. In the next cycle, I took a position as a teacher, working with troubled youth of my species, the ones who thought themselves too tough for the world, too strong to need anyone else, too prideful to accept help. I saw myself in every one of them, and I did my best to teach them the lessons I had learned on that battlefield. It's been decades now. I have a life mate, a small dwelling on a quiet world, and a life of peace that my younger self would have considered boring. But I've never been happier. And at least once a year, my life mate and I travel to Earth. We visit a small bar in a city called Portland, and we share drinks with the human friends I made on that one failed mission that changed my life for the better. Liam is retired now, with gray in his hair and grandchildren who climb on his lap. Ava works as a training instructor, teaching new soldiers how to survive their first battles. The others have scattered to different lives, but we keep in touch. We tell stories, laugh about old times, and never talk about that day in detail. Some horrors are better left in the past, remembered but not relived. But sometimes, when the night grows late and the drinks have loosened our tongues, Liam will look at me and smile.
Why are you crying, big fella?
He'll say, and I'll smile back, grateful beyond words that I was crying that day. Grateful that I was weak enough to ask for help. Grateful that I met humans who showed me that true strength isn't about how many weapons you can wield. It's about having the courage to admit when you're wrong, the wisdom to ask for help, and the humility to learn from those you once looked down upon. My forearms aren't wielding weapons anymore. These days, I use them to guide students, to embrace my life mate, and once a year, to raise a glass with the friends who saved my life by destroying everything I thought I was. And I've never felt more like a warrior than I do now, fighting the good fight in classrooms instead of battlefields, winning victories measured in changing lives instead of body counts. The young Zarek would have called me weak. The old Zarek knows better. I felt terror for the first time fighting alongside humanity, but I also felt compassion, friendship, and the kind of courage that comes from admitting your own failures. That's a trade I would make again in a heartbeat, or in my case, in 4 heartbeats, every single time.